Hello and welcome to episode 12 of my series of videos building through the terrain tutorials in the Battle Games in Middle-earth magazines. If you're not yet a subscriber, don't forget to subscribe and also ding that bell so that YouTube will tell you whenever one of my videos goes live. This is the final magazine in the first folder of the Battle Games in Middle-earth. So while I'm going to do the build, and it's going to be a very simple one, and my advanced alternatives will also be simple, at the end of the video I will also do a review of everything that I've built so far in the series, and hopefully some of you have built as well, and if you have, please drop a comment below. It'd be wonderful to hear that there are some people out there building along with me, but if not, that's cool as well. But yeah, if you are, do pop a comment below. So we'll get stuck into the build first of all, and then I'll see you again at the end to go through everything I've built so far in this great fun series. I'm having such a ball building these terrain tutorials for you. So here we are, the modelling workshop for magazine number 13, and this is episode 12. Scenic Details. From the humble beginnings of hedges and hills to impressive ruins and buildings, both your skills and your scenery collection will have developed with each modelling workshop. But I can tell you what, I'm struggling to work out where to store it all. So in this pack we take a look at what can be achieved by adding a few small details to your existing scenery. So there are actually 3 separate tutorials in this, which I'll do in order. First of all is paint washes, so shaving the edges, moss patches and brushes and reeds, which is adding details to existing builds. So we'll go through some of the existing builds and we'll do that. Then we have making a barrel, and then finally we have making a crate. So I will go through all of these in order. We will start off with adding scenic details to existing models, so putting washes on, shaving bushes, mosses, that sort of thing. And once I've done that, then we'll move on to the other 2, and then we'll go to the alternates that I want to talk to you about in this subject. So yeah, let's get started. So number 1 is paint washes, and I've pulled the one of the earliest ruins that we did in this series out to do this technique. So weathering is a technique of making your models look old, used, overgrown and well worn. One of the easiest ways to give this effect is to add a series of green and brown washes to the recesses and along the base. This will create an aged look for the terrain as if it has been exposed to the elements for many years. Dry brushing the edges of the ruins with a lighter grey will add to the definition and contrast, really making the weathering effects stand out. So what I've got here is a green and a brown paint, and I've got my ruin that we're going to weather now, and I've got some water here so that I can water down my paints. So let's get this going and you can see how I do this. So first of all, we're going to go for green, and as usual we will use the paint lid and put the paint pot to one side, and I'll pull some paint out onto my plate. Now the reason I'm doing this is because we want to water this down so that it becomes a wash. So what we'll be doing is we'll be taking paint out of our water, taking water out of our water container and creating a nice wash, as you can see. Okay, so we've got a nice wash there, and we can always water it down a bit more if we wish to. But you can see there that's not got no pigment in it, but is definitely very, very watery. Now these are just normal house paints, they're not craft paints or anything like that. I believe in using house paints for these sorts of things, and I think they're going to work quite nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this wash very, very lightly onto the model. So with the green done, what I'm going to do is over on this side, I'm going to put a little dollop of the brown. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to bring water in, and we're going to introduce water and water it down. And what we're going to do is we're going to first of all create a blend of the two, green and brown, and then we can put that on, and then we can go more to the brown. So it'll be kind of like wet blending, but without it being very wet, because it's going to dry fast, this. I'll let that dry, and then we'll come back for a dry brush with the white. So yeah, we'll come back to that when that's dry, and we'll have a look at what that looks like. I've had a thought, and I've decided that I'm going to use this item to demonstrate all of these early kind of like scenic detailings. Shaving the edges, not going to bother with that. It's not something that I really want to do, but I'll read it out to you. A very simple way of making your wooden fences appear old and weathered is to shave some chips out of the beams with a craft knife. When this is done, repaint the fence brown as before. Add some yellow and white paint to the brown to make a lighter brown colour. Dry brush this over the darker brown, creates a contrast of colour that brings out the details of the chips. That's a pretty cool thing, and you can also do it for stones, but I'm not going to do that because A, I don't want to, and I've kind of done that already in previous videos as well. So what we're going to do now is moss patches, and we're going to put some moss in some of the areas around here, and it's basically flocking. So you're going to get your PVA, you're going to dab your PVA where you want to have some moss. So we'll put some there initially, and then you're going to get your either static grass or flock, and this is, I'm actually using purchased static grass here. This is paid for, just to give a different technique. Bought this in Belgium a long time ago. Okay, and then empty that off, and then here we have a patch of moss on these rocks. What I'm now going to do is some moss, and you can see that that's already drying as well, my wash. It's looking really nice. I'm going to do some moss coming down from one of these cracks. So we're going to have a run of paint, run of glue like that, and then we're going to get a touch of the moss and drop it onto that glue, and that will do a moss coming down the wall, and then you can empty that off. So there we are, we have moss here, and now we also have moss on that back wall section there that you can see. So that's step 3, and step 4 is bushes and reeds. So this is 2 steps. First of all, bushes. Rough clumps cut from scouring pad. Here we are, we have a green scouring pad, it's quite a thick one. I'm going to cut a rough clump. There we are. And we will roughen that up even more, make it so it's not square. So just take chunks out of it and what have you, make it so it's not too obviously a chunk. There we are. And that will stick there. So let's get some PVA glue. That can now dry nicely in place there. And finally, for this section, it is all about bushes and reeds. So the bristles from an old brush, I always keep my old brushes, and as I'm doing the renovation we do end up with quite a lot of them, and I use them, as you can see, for this purpose. This one has been hacked away at quite a lot over the years. So what you do is, if you've got a brush that you're doing something like staining wood or whatever and you forget to clean it, don't throw it away, save it. Save it and come back to it when you're doing anything like this, or if you're making a river diorama or anything like that. And what you do is you cut a chunk out of the brush like this with your scissors. Okay, and there you have some reeds, and then you stick them in. So I'm just going to grab, I normally use super glue for this because it's got a better, faster adhesion than PVA and holds it upright. And often I'll actually use super glue gel, which I don't have immediately to hand. So we'll go with normal super glue. You put a dollop of super glue where you want your reeds to be, and then stand them up in it. And reeds are not always tidy, so if they fall over a little bit while you're doing it, then it just makes it look even more natural. And there we are. We have some reeds there at the back leaning up against the wall. So those are the first 4 steps on this scenic tutorial. I will now get ready to do the next, which is making a barrel, I believe. So now we're on to making a barrel. Creating a barrel shape. Small scenery pieces such as barrels and crates are ideal for giving an area a lived-in look. They also become very useful in a battle game as they can provide valuable cover. Making a few of these scenery pieces is fairly quick and simple. Okay, let's do it. So, to make a barrel, first saw off a piece of doweling about 1 inch long with a junior hacksaw. Now, I'm not going to do an inch of doweling because I happen to have this balsa wood strip which I bought for the previous build. So we're going to do that. It's about 1 inch long, 2.5 centimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 of these, one big and one small. So this is doweling that's about a centimetre, 1.5 thick. So we're just going to cut that first. Okay, so that's the first one. And then we're going to cut this one, which is a lot easier, but also is damaged. A lot easier, but I didn't do it very well. This is what I don't like about doweling, about balsa. It's so soft that you make the slightest mistake and it just breaks. So we'll just do this one as a slightly smaller barrel. And we won't try and be too brutal. We'll do a sawing motion. So there we are. Let's clean this off. So this is actually going to be part of the next step. Next, gently round the top and bottom edges of the dowel with sandpaper. So I'm also going to smooth off the end of this. So let's get this. I've got 2 grades. I've got a larger grade which looks like it's too high a grit. So let's try it on this one. Yep, that looks like it's going to be perfect. So first of all, let's smooth that off. Okay, so that's nice and smooth. So now we're just going to round off the tops and bottoms. And then we'll do the smaller one. I can probably do this all on the finer grit because it's not quite such a lot to shave off. And I think that looks a bit odd anyway in terms of its size, so I'm going to make it even smaller. There we are, we have one very large barrel and we have one small barrel over here. Okay, so the next step is going to be scoring grooves down the length of the barrel. So I will get that done. I might just adjust the camera, it's not very good angle at the moment. There we are, that's better, that's a slightly better camera angle. So what we're going to do is we're going to do grooves, and I'm actually going to do this with a sculpting tool, which I have just over here, so just 1 second. Rather than a knife, I'm going to use a sculpting tool. Okay, so now we're going to do iron banding. The iron bands holding the barrel together are very easy to make. Cut off 2 thin strips from a sheet of card. I have a sheet of card here, so let's do that. Get my safety ruler and cut off a very thin strip here. Wrap the card around the barrel, gluing it down every now and then until the card overlaps itself. So it's talking about using super glue, so I will use super glue. So we'll put a dab of super glue here and we'll start the card off. And with that wrapped round, what I'm going to do now is just put dabs of super glue along it to secure it. I need a new bottle of super glue. That one is rapidly becoming almost impossible to control. So anyway, I'll hold that now and I'll be back when I've done this and done the next band as well, and I'll come to painting the barrel next. Okay, now we're getting to painting the barrel. Sorry if I've been a bit kind of lackluster in this so far. It's a weird time in the world, and actually the last week or so it's really started getting to me, but I'm sure that everyone's struggling, well, not everyone, but I'm sure a lot of people are. So yeah, if you are, don't worry, so am I. Anyway, so painting the barrel. To paint the barrel, undercoat it black and then dry brush the whole barrel with brown. Now, I'm going to do that, so I'm going to grab my black, which is just up here, and I have my brown ready for the dry brushing. So I've actually put these, let me zoom in a little bit, I've actually put my barrels onto some wine corks, and stuck them on using or just stuck in a pin, a dressmaker's pin, into the wine cork, and that then means I'm able to paint this without holding it, which is a little tip for you. These wine corks were my way of painting miniatures, but now that I've got the other painting handles I've actually bought, they're so much better that frankly, there's no point in me using these for miniatures anymore. I just don't like how it is, but it's going to work very well for this. And because I've used balsa and it's very, very soft, it is just pushed in very, very easily. So anyway, I will get these painted black, and I'll be back for the dry brushing when they're both done and it's ready for that stage. My black undercoat has now dried. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my dark brown, my raw umber from Winsor & Newton, and I'm going to dry brush over that. So we're going to get some out of the lid, as is my habit, because I don't like risking knocking the paint over. And I'm just going to cover, actually we'll do it on the bigger one, it'll be easy for you to see. I'm just going to cover all of that, paint that over the whole thing, including the metal, as you can see, but leaving black in the lines. So it's not really a dry brush, it's more of a heavy overbrush. So I'll get that done, and I will do it on the smaller barrel as well, and then I will come back when this is dry with the next step. Getting close to finish this now, though of course after that it's making a crate, and then after that it's my advanced build. It's going to be a quicker video, this, I think. You'll be happy to hear after the epic from last week. While we're waiting for the barrels to dry, we're going to start off with the making a crate. So construction. Crates are also remarkably easy to construct. Make a small box shape out of several pieces of thick packing card stuck together. So what I've got here is actually some packing card stuck together left over from when I was making the walls, funnily enough, which I just kept because I don't throw things away, and now they're going to come in useful. So what you do is you make that and you cut them into a box shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, cut it carefully, like so, and I'm actually going to make it and 4 together to make it quite large. So we're going to make a note of there, and we're going to cut it to exactly the same dimensions. Okay, there we are. And then what we're going to do is we're going to glue these two together. When they're dry, we're going to come in and we're going to glue lengths of balsa. But I'll do that next. So I'll glue these together with PVA, and then I'll be back when they're dried. Okay, so the 2 blocks of cardboard have now dried. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to work with the balsa wood to clad it. So it says, glue balsa wood onto each end, trimming the wood so that there is no overhang. Then glue lengths of balsa along each side. When the glue is dry, use a craft knife to trim away any excess wood. So, and then there's some more steps after that. So basically what it's talking about is we get our bit of balsa and we're going to put glue a section to each end. So one to there and one to there. So what I'll do is I'll grab a pencil so that I can score that out. And as it points out, it doesn't need to be completely accurate at this stage because you can always trim it once it's dry. So we'll just do something that's roughly the right size. There we are. So we've got ourselves our square. And what we'll now do is cut that out with the Stanley knife and then glue it on. And I will do this, and then I will get the other ends done off camera because it's just the same repeated process. And then I'll be back for the next step once this is dry. So we have some PVA here. We will drop the PVA on, like so, and spread it around. and then there. Simple as that. So I'll do the other end, and then I'll also do my second box that I'm making, because I'm making two, and I'll be back when I'm doing the next bit of balsa work. As a little burst of alternative, I'm going to show making a crate slightly quicker even than what they're describing here. And we're going to use XPS. And it is as simple as finding some XPS that is about the right dimensions. Then we're going to cut this down, like so. Okay, and then we can split that in two. And if we get ourselves a figure, here is a, you can see it's quite a large crate. So if you want smaller crates, you can make them smaller, but here is a Gundabad Captain, as it happens, and those crates will look quite good at his scale. They're big crates, but I think they're good enough. So we can make more of that size if we wish. It's very simple. Let's make a pile. And maybe then what we'll do is we'll make a couple of smaller ones as well. There we are. So that's how quick it is that we've got all of the materials, as opposed to having to glue together two bits of cardboard and wait for it to dry and what have you. We've got the shape now there. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to score in the texture. So again, we could quite easily use these and glue some of the balsa wood. And maybe what I'll do actually, just as a separate demonstration, is we'll do that for one of them. So we'll glue balsa wood around one of these as well. But for the rest of them, what you can do is you can score in, and all I'm using here is a Bic propelling pencil with the nib in, so there's no lead poking out. And we're going to score in the lines where the wood planks might go. Okay, and like that, and like that. Yeah. So this is very similar technique to doing bricks. It's basically the same technique to doing bricks. But there we are. We have our box, our crate. So let's quickly get the rest of them done. Okay, so that took me about 3 minutes, and I've got all of those. So we will also do the same technique with the balsa that we're doing for the standard build. So let me get a smaller. We don't actually need to cut into that one yet. There we are. You see that'll be fine. So if we cut and glue that on, and that will have to wait to dry, which is one of the weaknesses of that other build technique, but that's fine. So we'll glue those on quickly. It's already a much more solid structure, feels much more stable and easier to work with, I think. So we'll quickly clamp that in so that it doesn't move, and we'll leave that to dry. And I'll come back to these when we get to the same stage, which is doing the cross struts. So I'll leave that to dry and finish this one and the other official builds, and we'll come back to these crates a bit later on. Okay, now we're going to do the more advanced build. Now this isn't really a specific scenic detail, it's more of an idea of something which you might find useful and you can extend and take wherever you wish. So what I do is I get these washers. Now these are larger ones. They I've got two sizes. This is the smaller size and this is the larger size. And I buy them for about 40p for a packet this size. They're very, very cheap. And I use these a lot. I have based miniatures on them as well as doing this idea for scenic terrain. So we'll open that, as you can see, brand new pack. And the second thing that you'll need at this stage is your masking tape, as traditional. Now, how I do this is I take the masking tape and, oh, sorry, I was not in shot then. I take the masking tape and I stick it sticky side up to my bench. So generally it'll look something like that. Okay, and I normally fold over one end just so that it doesn't kind of get out of hand. And then we take our washers and we literally stick them to the masking tape. Now these washers have two different sides, two different profiles. You can feel one side is slightly more rounded than the other, and I generally go for the more rounded side up and the sharper side down. So we will just drop all of these on to the masking tape. Okay, with that done, what we're going to do next is we're going to take our knife and we're going to separate each of the washers on its base. So I will grab my knife, which I can't see right now, so I'll pause the camera and grab my knife, and I will show you how we go about doing this. And this is something which you need to be really careful when you're doing. So I'll be back in 1 second when I've found my knife. Okay, I found it. I'd tucked it in underneath there, out of the way, safe. Okay, so we simply cut between each one. So you end up with each of the washers. I need to remember that word. Probably by the end of this video I will have remembered the word washer without saying So we cut each of those apart and you end up with one washer per section. Now the reason I do this is the next step is far easier if you have separated them first. So with them all separated, I will get a smaller knife than a Stanley knife. This is a place where you do really need your X-Acto blade, and it's also where you need to be really careful. So we get the blade and we cut around, we trim off the excess. So all you're left with is the masking tape underneath the washer. I said washer without And the best and quickest way to do this, and I have done this a lot, is using this technique. I've worked this out over a couple of years now of doing this, and what we'll end up with is a pile of these washers with the base underneath and the hole in the middle filled in, and that's key. So I'll get that done and pop some music on. That's done. That didn't take very long at all, and as you can see we now have a little pile of these. So the next step actually is to get your car primer out. So your cheapest black spray primer that you've got, and give these a spray on both sides. Now I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but the fact is that this galvanized, I think it's galvanized, I'm not sure, but the finish you've got here is not really going to accept very much, and so if you can get a good primer on that, then it will make the next steps easier. So I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to get these primed up and let them dry. That'll take a little bit of time. This is why I do this in batches, so you end up with not wasting so much time waiting for things to dry. So yes, I'm going to go down and get these primed up on both sides. So you do the bottom and the top, and I'll be back with this when that's done. So the ends are now glued on fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim the overhangs from the ends as it suggests, and then we will start to stick the sides on. So I will do that just with a sharp knife. As you can see, it cuts very nicely. It's one of the benefits of using balsa, is just how easily it cuts. Okay, so I will trim the rest of them and I'll be back for the next step very shortly. With those trimmed, what we're now going to do is we're going to stick the sides on. So this is a process which will take several steps because it's not immediate, so you don't just glue them all on, you have to glue it on and then wait. So what you do is you glue it on with a little bit of an overlap, because what you're trying to do is have it so that every side is slightly overlapping the other. So we will roughly mark around this like so, and a little bit further than it seems to be that you want it. And I'll do this for each of the 3 boxes, crates that I'm doing this for. So that one can go there, and then I'll glue that on. And then we'll do the same, as I say, slightly oversized. There we are, that's the next step. I will invite you along when I do the one after. Next step of this more advanced build, or the alternate technique, is going to be to put sand on top of these. So this is a 2-stage process because you have the hole in the middle. There are several techniques you can use. If you've got green stuff, you can green stuff, or you can put blue tack in first, but I normally like to just do it with 2 layers of PVA with sand. So what I do is I get the PVA and I fill the centre in, and then also spread it on the rest of it like that, carefully, more carefully than I did there. So then we just spread that around, either with your fingers or better with a brush, but I don't have one to hand. And then we get the sifted sand, which I use a lot. Apologies for the arm over the camera then. And we drop our sand on top. And we do that very, very gently so that it soaks in. So that's the first one. The second technique is to use the terrain paint. Now, the link for how I make that is in the description below. I'll put that to dry there. And for this I will need my brush, so I will go and get the brush now. So what we do here is give it a stir, because it's got a bit thick, and put some of the terrain paint onto your circle, onto your disc. And again, just very carefully, and drop the sand on top. You can use any colour of terrain paint because we are going to spray these again. Yeah, so I'll get this done and I will come back later when I come to the next step. The next step with these is another coat of the terrain paint and some more sand. Now, I did do one of these without terrain paint and with a very thick layer of glue, and that actually doesn't really seem to need this layer. The reason that I do this is if you look in the middle, you can see that there is that little dip. Now, as I said in the first clip, you can use green stuff or blue tack or whatever to make sure that doesn't happen, but I prefer not to, mainly because I have a limited supply of both, but I have a very ample supply of sand, so, and paint and water and glue. So doing this is not a big issue. It does add time and delay, which is a frustration obviously, because you want to get this done, but just a little dab of more terrain glue, scenic glue in the paint, in the centre, and then that's it, done. And then drop some more builder's sand, sifted sand on the top, and that will then complete this process. So I will get this done like so, and then when that's dry, we'll be ready to use these. We're still on step 1 for making a crate, still. This has been a really odd build. Really enjoyed it very much. Anyway, more of that later. Okay, so now that these are glued together and we have some very badly glued balsa wood, I'm going to do the scoring. So we'll be marking in our plank type things. So yeah, just using a square bradawl. It says that you can use either a blunt pencil or scissors, but because I've got the bradawl, I'm going to use that. And you can see that I should really have glued this balsa wood in place a different way, because scoring it across the grain is very hard, but with the grain works very well. Look at the difference. Yeah. Like I say, just haven't enjoyed this build. So I'm going to get that done for these 2 wooden blocks, and then we'll be back to do the cross struts. Finally, to the last step of stage 1 for making a crate. Crazy, right? So this is create the cross struts with strips of thin card or balsa wood, again trimming away any excess. So as opposed to the barrels where they tell you to wrap it around, what they're suggesting is use the same rough technique as we did for the balsa. So you stick it on with overlaps all the way around without trying to bend the corners, and then it should look okay. So what I'm going to do is, here I have my sheet of thin card, I have my safety ruler, and I have my Stanley knife, which is my usual tools for this sort of thing. And what we'll do is we will hold that down with the safety ruler and slice with the knife. And don't try to do these sorts of things in one pass, because if you try to do it in one pass, what will end up happening normally is the knife will get caught, and then you'll get either a rip or a tear, or you might even cut yourself, none of which are good outcomes. So that's how you can do that. We end up with this nice thin strip of card, and as I say, what they're suggesting you do is that you stick that down, and then don't bother trying to bend it like I'm doing, which is what they're suggesting, and cut and overlap and what have you. However, I think it's going to be very easy to do it like this. So I'm going to do one with it bent round, and I'm going to do one with it in the method that they suggest. So I'll get that done just with PVA, almost certainly using clamps, and then we'll be back for step 2, which is painting, and that will also involve these ones which I made just out of the XPS Blue XPS foam. So I'll be back when I'm ready to paint. In one of my recent videos, someone called this a flash of inspiration, which I thought was quite nice, but someone else then pointed out that it wasn't new, which I'm not surprised, but I did come up with it off my own bat, honest. So what we've got here is we have wood stain, and this is basically what we would use to treat external wood, and I'm going to use this to paint on my boxes, on my crates, because yeah, if you want something to look like wood, then you should use wood, which is what we're doing. We're using balsa. But why use paint when you can use something which is both going to preserve it and also give it the texture and the colour that you're looking for? The other good thing with this stuff is it dries super fast, so we can just do a couple of the sides on that and leave it, go to the other one, do a couple of sides on that, and then in a minute or so I'll be able to go and do the rest of it, and it will all be dry, and I won't have to worry about waiting for hours for the paint to dry, which is obviously a frustration, particularly when you're running as late as you are, as I am on this build. So I'll get that done, and I will do all the sides, and then on this one, which is made out of the polished XPS, I'm going to need to do that with the slow paint method. But that's the slow paint method as I've done on the barrels, so I won't wait for that to dry now, and I'll be back shortly with the silver work on the barrels and on these, and then pretty much we're done with this basic build. Thank goodness. It's been horrendous. I've really not enjoyed it. But more of that, as I've said, More on that later. Before we go on with the boring bit of painting crates and barrels, let's go to my more advanced build. So as you saw, I got these all done and ready, so they have their textured base on, and now they're ready for whatever we're going to do. So I make lots of these. I have a drawer full, which normally if I'm going to do this, I will then give another black overspray on these, a primer, just the car primer to seal them off, and then I stick them in my pile, and I make use of them often for basing miniatures, so basing my 20mm World War II miniatures. But in this case I'm going to do a few things that are slightly different, and so I'm going to leave this how it is for now and then seal it again later. So we're going to chuck some PVA on the plate, which is just out of shot, and we're going to show what sort of things you can do. This is going to give us some nice flexible small terrain, small scatter terrain. So first of all, I've got this little block of stone which has just come out of the garden, and I'm going to blob that onto the PVA, and I'm going to drop that onto the top of the base, and there we are. Now we have a stone that will act as some kind of cover, and can be moved around and doesn't take up much space to store. So there's one idea. Okay, quick as that. So let's get another base. And the second idea, this is going to take a little bit more work. So here I have a stick that again I've just picked up off the floor, and I'm going to dump that in some PVA. But this is going to take a little more work, because if I just put that in the PVA and let it go, it's going to fall over. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is I'm going to get my Citadel painting handle with a grabby thing. Okay, and this is going to get dropped in there into the painting holder, like so, and it fits fine. And then we can use the grabby thing to hold it so that it's going to dry. And this is by no means the final step on this style, because what we're also going to do is once that's dried, we're actually going to build up around the outside of this with some more sand and terrain mix, so that it makes it stronger. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll come back in, put some more terrain paint on, and put some more sand on, and that will then be solid. So yeah, that's another idea. You can do it to, I'll put it at a little angle to make it a bit more interesting, but you can put trees or small interests, so that could be a marker or something like that if you're playing the game. So I'll pop that to one side. And then the final idea, or the final suggestion, and this is probably going to be quite an obvious one as well. I have my clump foliage, which I made myself out of kitchen washing up scrubber brushy things that I've whizzed up in a blender and then put paint on, and we can just stick them on, and then we've got more interesting scatter terrain that adds interest and adds maybe cover or whatever, and takes no time at all. I mean, this process hasn't taken me any time really at all to make these. I really do like the use of washers for this. So we'll do another one in a different colour, just so we've got the variety. And then that there is what I do with washers as scatter terrain. There we are. So that will dry. So we have a couple of different ideas there. You've got wood, got a stone, and you've got maybe flock. You could do static grass. Actually, what I will do is I will just grab one more thing. I will just pause the camera and I'll be back in 1 second, because I've got one more idea to show you. I'm back. So the final idea is to use bristles from a brush. Now this is a common idea for making reeds or what have you, but you can also do it so that it's just a little bit of interest in your game. And when I'm sticking this down, I will always use super glue gel, because it provides a bit more stability and a bit more instant hold than PVA does. So I'll put a dollop of gel where I'm going to put my reeds. Okay, I'll put the lid back on straight away, and then drop the reeds in place. And if you have super glue activator, which I do, this isn't a bad time to use it. So didn't think of that. There we are. So we'll stand it up in there, and a little spray of super glue activator, and there you have it. They're a little bit unstable. I will probably do the same technique as I'm going to use on the wood and build the area up around it with some more glue. But yeah, you can see, the sky's the limit really with this. Whatever you can think of, you can use them as good bases because they're nice and solid. Because they've got the masking tape on the bottom, they're soft, so they don't cause scratches or anything like that. It's a good idea. So anyway, that's my more advanced build done. Nice and simple. I hope that you found that useful. And now the final stage for these. So I have some silver paint on my wet palette down here, which is just off shot. And what I'm going to do is pick out with silver on these straps. So you can see that that's going to be quite an easy process to do. This is just using a probably, well, it's definitely a Vallejo, it's probably chainmail silver or something. I toyed briefly with the idea of using real steel, but figured it says silver, so we'll do silver. What I'm going to do with these is potentially use some pigments to put some dirt on, and then that will highlight out the textures that have been scored in the wood, and then they'll be done. So I'm going to get this done on all of these and also on the barrels that you see there, and then this whole sorry process can come to a close. I've been really uninspired by this. I'll go into that when I do the wrap up in a very short while. So yes, I'll get this done and then we'll wrap this video up, and we will look forward very much to the next video in this series, which I think is likely to be slightly more up my street. So there we are. I did it. I got there. Just proves you can do what you want to do, and sometimes you can even do what you don't want to do. So there you are, another Battle Games Middle-earth build done, and probably the one I've enjoyed the least. Now, I have whinged a bit and I have really struggled. There's been other external things going on, obviously this corona situation, and now that I'm starting to look for work, that's taken up a lot of my emotional energy. But also, I think this just shows what I like to make, and that's very important. And we're not going to all like to make the same stuff. I'm sure some people would really enjoy making barrels and boxes and what have you, but for me, the things that I love and the things that I find easier actually is the bigger builds, or the more involved builds, the ones where you can really stretch yourself and really express yourself. And making something like this, it just bores me, frankly. I mean, this would be what I would use a 3D printer for if I owned one, definitely. I would not be going out making barrels. I'd print them out because, hey, it's much more believable, they look better, and it's just less drudge. That's not really what I do this for. So anyway, I hope that despite my grumbling, it's been an interesting video to watch, and let me know down below if there's anything that you really enjoy doing or don't enjoy. And yeah, I mean, if there is, I mean, it's fine, isn't it? We do this for fun. It's not a job, well, not for all of us, and so why should we do something that we find boring? So yeah, I've got through there, and I think that my alternate suggestion shows you a little bit what I'm talking about. It's a bit more creative, it's a bit more thinking outside the box, and that's what I enjoy. Anyway, thank you very much for getting this far if you did, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. It's lovely to see those numbers rise. It's amazing to me. I'm over 570 now, I think, which is just incredible. And don't forget to ding the bell so that whenever one of my videos goes live, YouTube does actually tell you rather than it just like thinking you don't care. And I will close off, as I always do, by saying thank you so much for watching another Beard Clipper video, and please stay safe, stay healthy and stay well at this crazy time.